Dave Gardy here for Ballast Water Treatment Report number 12. Last time we did 11 and we started talking about the Vessel Incidental Discharge Act, VIDA, which just passed the House and the Congress. We raised some interesting points back then. Here with Steve Candito, who's CEO of Ecochlor. Steve, thanks for joining us.
Nice to see you again, Dave.
Now, for part two of this series, the VIDA Act, I want to talk a little bit about the discrepancies that were in place with IMO and Coast Guard. Did VIDA do anything about rectifying those discrepancies?
Yes, well, this is very interesting. Although the main focus of VIDA over the years was to get a uniform federal regulation and keep the U.S. states out of the picture, although they still certainly have some input, this new VIDA legislation actually did some things to conform federal regulations with IMO regulations, the international regulations. There was always some differences there that also caused the ship owning community some heartburn.
Now, last time we talked about the the exceptions they got in return for giving up the control to the federal side. But there are other exceptions in the VIDA Act. Can you give us what those are?
Yeah, so there were actually three different areas that they focused on. The first and probably most important was small vessels, fishing vessels that got caught up in this incidental discharge requirements, where like a fish processing vessel would actually have to clean its deck of the fish parts before discharging over the side, which was difficult. So those are all out now. Those are exempt from that. Although you do have to remember that the small vessels still have to meet the ballast water regulations. The second exception was for inland vessels. I guess there was some thought that if you're inland, you don't have invasive species from one area inland or another, but there can be risks there. So those are no longer exempt. The inland vessels now have to abide by the Vessel Incidental Discharge Act. And then the third exemption was kind of an odd one, where crude oil tankers that were in a coastwide trade didn't have to meet these requirements. And of course, that exemption has gone away in VIDA too. They do have to meet these requirements.
That's interesting. So they must have had a lobbying group to get that. Now it's gone. I guess that's too bad. Well, so I guess the question I have finally is that the states did also get something else, though. They lobbied for an emergency requirement so that if there is a particular species that's invasive that comes in that wasn't accounted for, they can go back to the state temporarily. Is that how it works?
Yeah, so it temporarily can actually be for quite an extended period of time, but it gives the states the rights that if they see something with an aquatic nuisance species going on that they really weren't anticipating, to act more quickly and not have to go through a full legislative process to do something to protect their local waters. So it can be either governors of states or the EPA can use this emergency provision to tighten up the regulations on a temporary basis if it's needed.
And just a quick question, the state transfer to the federal government, the state regulations were a little more intensive than the federal government ones were, is that right?
Yes, that's been the history, and that's why VIDA was so important to get some uniformity. I mean, states like California, their standard was maybe 100 times more stringent than the Coast Guard standard, and similar things up in the Great Lakes states too.
Excellent. Well, that's part two of our Vessel Incidental Discharge Act discussion. Part one is in Ballast Water Treatment Report number 11. Go take a look at that for four prior parts. Thank you, Steve. From Ecochlor CEO here in New York, I'm Dave Gardy from Maritime TV. Thanks for joining us on Ballast Water Treatment Report.